Hey, this is Notser, and this is a look at the late tiers of the Soviet destroyer line. At tier 7, we have the Minsk. This is a recent addition to the Soviet destroyer line. This was added in 2 or 3 patches ago, and it just carries on the Soviet destroyer identity. It's got great guns, 130mm guns, long range. You want to extend it even further with advanced firing training. Really terrible torpedo range, almost useless. The only time you would ever have a chance to use it is if you were coming around an island, or perhaps you were doing something in a sort of last-ditch survival. But bread and butter is all on relying on the guns and their firing. So, in my case, I try and stay at max range or medium to long range to engage the target. Whenever I get into a scenario that is overextended, I get into smoke. Just like any other Soviet destroyer who has smoke, by the way, some of them are not going to. So, yeah, Minsk, solid ship. I don't really have any issues with it. Expert marksman is definitely recommended. It is something that you're going to have to deal with, of course. That's just the nature of the Soviet destroyers at this point. But the guns are great. If you get a 12-point commander, you'll have expert marksman, and people will be envious of the output you can do. Another tier 7, the premium Leningrad. Now, it might look familiar because it is the Minsk model. Leningrad came out before the Minsk, but the Minsk basically joined the ranks. The difference is you gain a little bit of range with the Minsk. On your main battery, you give up torpedo ability. On the Leningrad, you drop a little bit of your main battery range, but you have 8-kilometer range torpedoes, and I, quite frankly, believe that that is a much better thing to have rather than maybe half a kilometer on your main battery. This is a ship that I used extensively to go down the ranks when we did tier 7 for the rank season last, and I couldn't be happier with it. It just really performs exactly as a Soviet destroyer should. Premium, of course, premium income, and you know, what else can I say? Just like the Minsk, you really want to be medium to long range. You can get in range to send your torpedoes. You really prefer it when the enemy is going to gain that distance so you don't get close to being detected. If you get detected, of course, you've got smoke. Just like all the other Soviet destroyers so far, you can hide effectively with your smoke. You can't swap it out for a heal, not yet, and you have speed boost. So, fast destroyers with pretty average concealment. Unlike the other tier 7, you can actually have torpedo systems that are indeed effective. So, I've really enjoyed the Leningrad. If it goes on sale again, it is a great Soviet destroyer to pick up. I really doubt that they would ever do a tier 5 for the rank season, but tier 7, absolutely, they'll do it again. At tier 8, we've got the Kiev. The Kiev is, of course, legendary in the Soviet destroyer. It used to be tier 7. It was a beast then. It got targeted nerfs, and it's always been effective. I've always had success in the ship. It moved up to tier 8. It's got better torpedoes than it used to. Its range is great. Speed is great. Concealment is where it's really bad. But medium to long range, there is no equal at tier 8, in my opinion, from the destroyer point of view. It is just extremely annoying to deal with if you're a battleship or a cruiser. You're going to be maneuverable. You're going to be small enough that it just is very difficult to get the chance to take you out in a timely manner. In this particular example, there's about to be 2 destroyers that are going to ambush me and try and take me down, and you're going to see just why this ship is so good. Turrets extremely fast. Torpedo systems have great angles to send. If I had to critique the torpedoes, they're a little slow, but you really can't afford to do anything about that. You can't pick up torpedo acceleration because it would just be ridiculously short range. So I would just live with the torpedoes. Get into a situation where you can use your guns. The torpedoes are just a bonus, but you don't ever have to worry about expert marksman on this ship. The turrets are like 10 seconds, if that. it is extremely quick to rotate it to the other side. As you can tell, these guys were not ready for the beast that is Kiev, and they got taken out. Now, of course, I'm in a really bad spot, and I got taken out, but Kiev, just a monster. Next up, we've got the alternative line, Tier 8, Ognevoi. This used to be Tier 6, it's Tier 8, and this is not like anything else you've played in the Soviet destroyer line. It's got a low amount of guns, 4 total, 2 in each turret. It has good range on them, and has good range on its torpedo systems. So the idea, in my opinion, it's very slow, by the way, and the concealment's great. So the idea of this is sort of a hybrid between a Japanese destroyer and, of course, a Soviet destroyer. I like to build this exactly as a Japanese. Faster torpedo rearm. You also have torpedo acceleration because it's 10 kilometers. You can get it up to a speed that's useful. And rely on the concealment. You can fire your guns, much more prevalent than something like the Japanese or the Americans, because Americans have really, really bad drop-off, and of course the Japanese, very bad turret traverse. But don't be afraid to use the guns. Just be afraid if you're too close to the opposition. You want to be very careful. This is sort of a measured playstyle, like the German destroyers, basically. Use your guns when you get a chance to kill a destroyer, of course. Don't use your guns unless you get the opportunity to do that. It's really about the torpedoes, playing the map, denying line of sight, gaining line of sight for your team, and using smoke whenever you can. Now, there is one other aspect of this ship that is unique. It can use defensive fire. The alternative line in the Soviet destroyer line can do that. However, as a North American player, I don't really see a lot of aircraft carriers, so it's hard to justify bringing it. If you happen to queue with an aircraft carrier, absolutely use defensive, because you know it's going to be useful, right? Overall, a great ship. I actually enjoyed this more than a lot of Soviet destroyers. At Tier 9, we have the Tashkent, or the Trashkent, as it was lovingly referred to in its previous version. It has good main battery range, it has pretty fair torpedo range, it's really fast, terrible concealment, and its maneuverability leaves something to be desired. I used steering mod, and I highly recommend you use it. That is one way that it became useful back in the day when steering mod 3 was introduced. They improved the torpedo range by about 2 kilometers when it went up to Tier 9. You have access to rate of fire, obviously, modules that 9 and 10s have. You can't get range, don't even think about that. And then, the Tashkent is the first Soviet destroyer that has access to the heal ability, and honestly, the first destroyer in the game. The skill is usually reserved for battleships and high-tier cruisers. However, they gave it to the Soviets. The top 2 Soviet destroyers in the main line about 3 patches or 4 patches ago. What does it provide? Well, it gives you 3 heal charges, or 2 if you're non-premium. If you have Superintendent, another charge. And I really like it from a random battle point of view. I don't like it if I had full comm communication, because smoke denies way more damage than this heal could ever. However, in a random battle situation, you can't talk in comms that accurately. You can't give them countdown on when the smoke's going to go away, right? It's really awkward to do that. There's not a lot of hotkeys that are associated with that. So instead, I pick up the heal, I try and stay visible, detect the enemy, and sort of bait them to fire at me versus the battleships and the cruisers. It really works out very well, in my opinion. You can't overextend, obviously, because you're not going to get out with smoke, but medium and long range, you can take way more damage and be way more annoying to the enemy with heal in your typical random battle. At Tier 9 in the alternative line, we have the Udaloi. Now, this used to be the main line 9. It's the alternative line 9. It has great range on its guns. It has fair torpedo range. I would wish it could get a little bit out, but I understand. What's unique about it is it has another set of 5 torpedoes. One is center aligned. The other 2 are set on the port or the starboard side. So the idea, quite simply, is that you can send 2 torpedoes on your port and then 1 on your starboard. You always have to be prepared for this. You can choose to extend the concealment, extend the main gun. I like to play it like every other Soviet destroyer, but it's on the edge enough that it could fulfill pretty much every role that you ask it to. Just like the Ognevoi, it has access to defensive fire. If you so choose, I wouldn't recommend equipping it unless you knew you were going to face off against enemy aircraft carriers if you're in a division, or if you're on a server that uses aircraft carriers more extensively than mine. Obviously they don't, so I don't take it. As far as the Udaloi is stacking up against others, you know, you could get better main battery accuracy. It's very maneuverable, no armor whatsoever. It has pretty much everything you ask for in a destroyer. I've seen people not, you know, particularly like it as much. You know, they're lukewarm on it, and I just am not. I've always liked it. Is it the best Soviet destroyer ever? No. But it fulfills so many roles so well, I don't care. I don't care. If I feel, you know, if I was one of those players that didn't have access to a bunch of lines, I could make this whatever I wanted it to be. And that is attractive to a player who wants to try and save some coinage. At tier 10, we have the Khabarovsk. This is a real monster. This is the ship that is just so dominant. They recently nerfed it slightly, but it's still a beast. It's got 8 130mm guns, fair range, good range on the torpedoes, and it actually has armor, 50mm. So you want to avoid shooting the midsection and just under the guns. I would recommend, if you were engaging it with your HE, shoot the nose or shoot the superstructure. Unless you're a German cruiser in the next patch, it's just going to bounce off or shatter. Instead, HE shatters, AP bounce off. So that's just one thing you need to consider. You can't equip better range, so you go rate of fire, of course. It can also use heal. I highly recommend doing it. It just allows you to operate near isolated on a flank, take the enemy's attention away from your team, and dish out a ton of damage. I regularly score at least 100,000 easily per battle. Use AP when the target is broad, use HE in every other scenario. If you so desire, you could get a little bit close and send your torpedoes. For instance, when the enemy is aggressively pushing and you're ahead of their flank, then you can use your torpedoes pretty consistently on cooldown. If you're in this scenario where you're just trying to beat them back and keep them away, you really can't get close. You've got to rely on your range because the rudder was nerfed so hard. You used to be able to potentially choose between concealment and the steering mod 3, but you just can't do that anymore. You need steering mod, you need rudder shift, you have to. Its best rudder shift is like 5.5. At its worst, 11. So yeah, you need to improve the rudder, but it's just a beast otherwise. At the alternative line tier 10, we've got the Grozovoi. The Grozovoi is a little bit of everything. It's a smaller, more compact destroyer. It's got 6 guns, rather aimed, but it has better rate of fire than the Khabarovsk. It's got the 10-kilometer range torpedoes, which is appreciated. It has okay speed, nothing like the mainline Soviet destroyers. Its concealment is okay. It's better than the mainline, but it's not really better than anything else. However, it's close enough on the edge that I could decide, okay, I want to go concealment build, or I want to go an anti-air build because there's just so many aircraft carriers. Can't say that for North America, but I can say that for other regions and maybe competitive format. The Grozovoi, though, I have found a lot of success treating it like the Khabarovsk, and people really dislike me. Look at this madman! The Shimakaze aggressively pushing forward, trying to kill me. It's just, I was streaming. My teammates did not respect him. I almost got him dead before that second set, but no. I was not successful. But the Grozovoi has the ability to use defensive fire. Its AA protection is not quite as impressive as it was initially when it was tested by community contributors, so don't look at that content as it's like gospel. That's completely irrelevant now. It's a solid ship, though. Could be as concealed as a German destroyer or as unconcealed as a Khabarovsk. It's really up to you how you decide to play it. You could decide, hey, the rudder is pretty good. I'm not going to pick it up. I'm going to go for something like concealment module instead. I prefer to just play at mid to long range, wiggle all the time, force the enemy to waste gun cooldowns on you, and you can tank potential damage. I hope this was interesting. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.